The recon ability, also known as wall hack, has been replaced with an ability to hack walls. Very clever, Embark. Now we can do some very cheeky cash out steals. The Data Reshaper lets you change objects in the battlefield, even ones midair. But is this gadget really as bad as people say? Let's get into the details on the new medium class specialization and gadget. Let's start with the basics on Dematerializer. The specialization has 3 charges. Each use of hacking a wall lasts 30 seconds and a cooldown of 10 seconds. The basic use is being able to dematerialize a wall or object in order to phase through it. For the Data Reshaper, you get 1 charge on a 15-second cooldown, and it can transform objects into other objects, even placed objects like mines, RPGs, frags, etc. Now let's get into some basic tips with the Dematerializer. Tip number 1, change your logic. Overall, I think what is important with the Demat is to change the entire way of thinking and the way you move. A good way to get into the habit of using the specialization is refusing to use doors for a little bit. Always walk through walls and ceilings. Once you get locked into your mind that you can traverse the map differently, a lot of the next tips will start to come naturally. Tip number 2, flank. Try flanking your opponents and approaching from unexpected angles. This is honestly the main use of this specialization. Be unpredictable. Tip number 3, steal cash outs. A common tactic is to drop the cash out a floor below and seal it back up in order to steal safely. You can expand on this by stealing upwards using the gravity cube, like I mentioned in my gravity cube guide. Tip number 4, APS inside of walls. You can open up walls or objects, place an APS inside, and then close it back up. This makes your APS very secure. This doesn't work as well as objects that can be moved, such as those yellow blocks and chairs, but solid walls work great. Tip number 5, preventing rematerializing. You can stand inside of a dematerialized spot, and it will actually not close until you leave. You can use this to hold off angles, and the moment you leave, it will rematerialize. However, this obviously only works if you've been sitting in it longer than 30 seconds. This also works for cash outs. As a bonus, some objects won't actually prevent rematerializing, such as goo, which can act a little weird, like goo always does. Tip number 6, zipline lock. You can demat a zipline, and now it can no longer be broken by, meleeing it, shooting it. The only way to detach it is to break the surface that the zipline is attached to. This can be useful if you want to keep a zipline up, potentially when fighting over suspended structures. People are going to be going up to the suspended structure, you can quickly lock this up ahead of time in order to have your team still be able to reach the structure. Tip number 7, removing goo. Dematting goo can kind of be a bit weird, but knowing the correct blob to hit is good if you want to remove a chain of goo. You can also use it to launch yourself, which can be pretty useful. If you run a goo grenade, for example, you can create a pseudo launch pad. Just make sure that you use this twice and you stand at the edge of the goo. Now let's go over some of the Data Reshaper uses, and then I'll get into my opinions on these new tools. Tip number 1, barrel pattern. There's a cycle for the barrels and what they turn into. Pattern goes explosive, smoke, goo, fire, gas, and back to explosive. Tip number 2, reshape multiple objects. Since it has a small radius but seems to have an unlimited amount of objects it can hit within that radius, try finding clusters of objects to reshape. You can also reshape the subscribe button from not subscribed to subscribed. It'll help me out a lot. Tip number 3, cash out defense. Use the random objects in a room like chairs, plants, etc., clump them up in one spot, and transform them so that you have barrels to help defend a cash out. Tip number 4, adapt. A general tip is to adapt on the fly. Depending on what the Data Reshaper gives you, if you get like smoke, try hiding your teammate while they steal. If you get gas, throw it at the enemies. Keep adapting on the fly. Tip number 5, reshape threats. You can actually transform APS turrets, guardian turrets, mines, and even mid-air stuff like frag grenades and RPGs. Obviously, this can be quite good when either attacking or defending a cash out. Now, personally, when it comes to medium, I often just use heal beam, as in higher elo, that's kind of the only option you get for medium. However, if you do have a heal and a mesh already on your team, you can potentially bring the Dematerializer as your third. This can actually set up some pretty unique plays and situations for your team. I often find it's more optimal to bring a second healer if you are choosing to go that medium heavy route, simply because of how strong the heal beam is in the current state of the game. I think working Demat into your team requires a lot of understanding from the entire team, as you can start to approach from new angles and play the game in a very different way. Most people aren't going to be accustomed to that, which is why I think it isn't exactly the best pick if you are solo queuing, because most people are not going to be going up to your dematerialized walls. You're not going to be able to set up a lot of plays for your teammates. They're not going to be playing around it because it's just pretty unfamiliar. If you are with a coordinated team, I think this could actually be a pretty fun pick, but even in the highest of elo, we're just not really seeing it picked right now. It just seems like just bring a second healer. As for Data Reshaper, I genuinely think this is the worst pick in the game. Like, if I made a tier list of everything in the game, this is the bottom pick. It needs a lot of buffs in order to be useful. That explains some situations better. If you're dealing with mines, you can shoot at them or use an APS to remove them by throwing the APS that's placed on an object. Removing mid-air frags and RPGs, again, APS just does it better. Barrels are in a pretty weak spot after the nuke nerf, so personally getting an RNG barrel just isn't good, especially in most maps. It's pretty easy to find them all over the map, so if you're planning ahead, you can probably find that red or gas barrel that you're looking for. Removing enemy turrets is neat, but you have to get in close range in order to do that, which kind of typically put you in a pretty dangerous spot. So shooting them from further range is obviously much safer and gets the job done. There's very few niche scenarios where Data Reshaper may come in handy, but overall I think other gadgets just simply do its job better while providing much more overall. I'm hoping to see this gadget get a nice buff in the future because it's a fun concept, but it's just very bad. If you have any further tips, comment below. Stick around to check out some gameplay of these abilities in action. Thank you to my YouTube members, Melly Joyce, TJ Burke, Jerrysec, Broken Weasel. I'm really glad to see Embark added new ways to play the game, and these feel like a great fit to creating a sandbox environment. I look forward to future balancing patches and new additions to the game. Be sure to reshape the battlefield, and I will see you in the finals.